this isn't thriving. This isn't really enjoying life. I told someone I was like paddling just to keep my head above water,
Yeah.
trying to run a full-time practice, trying to support my friends and family, trying to be a good mom. And I really felt like I was not doing a good job at any of it. And none of us like to feel that way. So it took that period of life to be a wake-up call for me to make a dedicated effort to do things differently. And I started listening to podcasts. I spoke with some mentors. I started learning that personal development was like a thing. It wasn't just like a woo-woo book in the library. All we're taught is to hustle, all to get to vet school, all through
Yeah.
vet school, all to get through your internship, all to start a practice. And that's all I knew.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
If you're looking for help with ultrasound scanning, whether that's choosing a new machine or developing your ultrasound skills, check out the First Opinion Veterinary Ultrasound website at fovu.co.uk for independent machine reviews and online and in-person teaching options. FOVU, simplifying ultrasound.
Okay, guys, today we have Dr. Stacey Cordivano, who is a graduate of the Virginia, Maryland Regional College of Veterinary Medicine and the founder of Clay Creek Equine Veterinary Services in Chester County, Pennsylvania. So I'm super excited to have an equine vet on our show here. Her passions in equine ambulatory practice include emergency medicine and chiropractic care. Based on her experiences in equine practice over the last 14 years, Stacey is passionate about personal development and financial education topics, so we're very compatible there. In May of 2020, she started production of the Whole Veterinarian Podcast as a way to share these topics with her veterinary colleagues. So we're podcast twinsies also. She is also the co-founder of the Sustainability in Equine Practice Seminar series, which is super awesome and so inspiring. And we're also kind of conference twinsies now, I guess. So she did give an amazing lecture at the House Call and Mobile Vet virtual conference in February. And so I've been super excited about this interview for a while. Also, she has a hilarious Instagram. So follow her at the Whole Veterinarian Instagram handle. So welcome, Stacey. I'm super excited you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here too.
Yay! So I'm going to start out the episode with the way I always started out. What's your favorite snack to eat while you're on the way to call, seeing your equine patients?
Yes, I've had years to perfect this, and it may not be the healthiest thing, but it's definitely perfect peanut butter bars with
Mm.
or without chocolate chips. Either way, I'll go either way.
All right. Cool. What's in them? Is it just like straight peanut butter?
Pretty much. I think there may be some almond flour and sugar added probably, but it's one that actually sustains me, which is key for me because I don't bring enough snacks, generally speaking.
Hmm.
Oops.
And sustainability is important. You're the queen of sustainability.
Trying.
Yeah, we're all trying. That's the best we can do. Very nice. So, can you tell me a little bit about your story in terms of how you ended up as an ambulatory equine vet? I mean, maybe you can fill me in actually. Is that the default? Do most equine vets become an ambulatory practitioner?
I would say that is the default. Yes. For me personally, there was never any other option. My cousin was an equine vet. He's my mom's cousin, actually. So I grew up with him being an ambulatory equine vet, and that's all I ever wanted to do. That being said, a portion of us do work in clinics, but generally speaking, that's more of a specialist role. Haul-in facilities are becoming more commonplace just because of the shortage of equine vets. But yes, I would say the default is to become an ambulatory vet.
So, what are hauling facilities? That's not something.
Yeah, so haul-in would be like having a clinic, more like small animal, where they would bring their horse to you, and there's a facility to work on either multiple horses at one time or back to back. So obviously, from a scheduling perspective, you can get more done during the day.
Are they cheaper? Like, are the prices more affordable for people, or does it not really work like that?
It probably depends on the practice. I think generally you either would not get a call charge or the fee to come in would be cheaper than a call charge. That being said, it's none of the call charges are all that expensive. So
Yeah.
I have heard people say that their in-clinic fee is not low enough to not just pay the extra $10 or $15 to have them come to the farm. So that's probably just another example of a way we should probably be increasing our travel charges as you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, from everything I've heard from your kind of account of what your corner of the industry looks like, I just want to be like, "Let me come over there and raise your prices for you real quick."
I want that too, Eve. I want you to come and do that too.
Yeah. It's really tough when the whole industry sets up a precedent that kind of keeps you trapped or at least feeling trapped.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's, like you said, this is the default. This has been years and years of practice this way. So they probably didn't need to be quite as profitable before. They didn't have the same debt load. They didn't have the same, need for technology that we do currently. So yes, the entire industry does collectively need to increase pricing, but it is a struggle for sure.
Yeah, totally. And so I guess you answered what I was going to ask next, which was, what appealed to you about traveling to your patients? Or is that just, like, that's just what you do?
No, I actually really enjoy it. So I have worked, my internship was in a clinic setting, and I prefer traveling. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like I'm able to see the patient in so much more of a normal environment. I'm able to see the food that they're eating and the supplements on the shelf. I can pull their saddle out. I can watch them be ridden. Behavior definitely changes when I think probably any animal, but definitely when a horse comes to a new place and you just don't see the same animal. So I actually really prefer, and I like the variety of it too. Being stuck in a small animal clinic working all through college was not for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of claustrophobic too. And, folks who work on horses tend to be, in my mind, outdoorsy.
Yeah,
And,
I think so.
most people ride horses outdoors and engage with them outdoors. I feel the same way. I really like traveling too. And it's just sort of a little bit of a connection with nature in a
Mhm.
way. Like you can see if it's daytime or if it's nighttime. When you're in the clinic, you get in, ass crack of dawn, pardon my language, and, it's whatever time it is, and then you leave and it's dark and you don't get a sense of what the seasons are doing. Like, oh, it's getting darker earlier, it's getting darker later. This is
Yeah,
what
I
the
cannot
flowers
imagine that.
look like blooming on the hill that I drive by all the time. So that's like not even like the patients themselves, like that's just like the outside world that you can connect with a little more. And then, just everything you said about seeing the patients in their natural environment and when they're not freaked out.
Mhm.
Do horses get pretty freaked out in the clinic
Mhm.
as well?
Yeah, I mean, lameness cases are difficult a lot of times in the clinic because if it's a subtle lameness, just the amount that we would say up, like we call horses up when they're excited. I don't know, that doesn't make any sense now that I'm saying it out loud. But just the little boost of excitement or adrenaline or whatever it is,
Oh.
it can often make them look completely sound. So, yeah, totally makes a difference.
So interesting. I forget how much lameness work you guys do. That's like really at the center of everything.
It depends on the practice and the area, but certainly for me and my training and, the last 12 years of practice, sports medicine is a big part of mine. Yep.
Very cool. So we're pretty similar in that you also have a really interesting story and perspective about mobile practice and how that relates to burnout and kind of rediscovery of how to live life on your own terms again. Can you tell me a little bit about your struggles and what got you to the point where you are now, where you're advocating for sustainability, for wholeness, for being a whole human being, not just kind of pigeonholing ourselves into these vet robot type thing. So tell me a little bit about your story there.
Sure. I like to say that it's not really a remarkable story. It's a pretty common story, actually. But in 2018, I had two kids under 3. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. So that meant my choice was to wean my son early, which anyone who's breastfed knows that's a hard enough decision to make when it's not being made for you. I had a close friend and colleague who lost her baby. I had an emergency appendectomy on Thanksgiving Day after cooking dinner for my entire family. And it was after that run of things, which again, anyone could experience. But it was after that for me that I finally took a breath and a break to be like, I'm barely getting by here.
Yeah.
This isn't thriving. This isn't really enjoying life. I told someone I was like paddling just to keep my head above water,
Yeah.
trying to run a full-time practice, trying to support my friends and family, trying to be a good mom. And I really felt like I was not doing a good job at any of it. And none of us like to feel that way. So it took that period of life to be a wake up call for me to make a dedicated effort to do things differently. And I started listening to podcasts. I spoke with some mentors. I started learning that personal development was like a thing. It wasn't just like a woo woo book in the library. All we're taught is to hustle, all to get to vet school, all through
Yeah.
vet school, all to get through your internship, all to start a practice. And that's all I knew. And especially in equine world, that's also our culture.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable. We're losing people left and right. And there was me, like unhappy and struggling. So I started finding some of this work that I could do on myself personally. I also, have spoken with a therapist and counselor on multiple different occasions in my adult life. And I just got to the point where I said, I have to do practice differently or I'm not going to be practicing anymore. And I didn't really like that idea. So
Yeah.
started doing things a little differently. And it's still a work in progress for sure.
Always. Yeah, always. I relate to so much of that. And I'm so glad you were able to kind of turn it around and, make the story your story instead of having you living life on the terms of what our industry has dictated we must do, whether that is to martyr ourselves, to become not the parent we wanted to be, to put our career first before our family. And, that's the default as well. That's the default. So I'm really glad you were able to take it back. I love that you checked in with a therapist. And I kind of have this feeling that based on the work we do and the degree of trauma involved in it, what we see, what we experience vicariously, the loss, like just the closeness with life and death, every case, every single case,
Mhm.
it's life and death in many. Even if it's a vaccine.
There's always the risk. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially in equine, like you break a leg and that's it. It's insane to me.
Mhm.
And I sort of feel like anyone who's a veterinarian or a vet tech even should be in therapy. Like, we all
Probably.
should be in therapy.
I mean, I think an amazing perk of some of these memberships would be therapy or counseling or peer-to-peer support of some sort. It would be amazing. I mean, that's like ultimate goals, I think, for our national organizations to provide that for us because cost is prohibitive for a lot of people. I mean,
Yeah,
it is.
it
I'm lucky to
really
be able to
is.
pay for it.
It really is. I'm a little bit proud of myself. I hooked up my House Call Vet Academy people with, I can't remember if it's 2 weeks or a month of free therapy through an organization called BetterHelp. They're
Yeah.
really, I really, I've enjoyed getting therapy through them.
I have used them as well. It was super handy at that
Oh,
time
that's
in
so
life.
cool.
Yeah, love BetterHelp. I got matched with an awesome therapist. It seems like luck, but she was great for me
Me
at the time.
too. Me too. Yeah, and it's not always easy to find the right therapist for
Mm-mm.
you because there's so many approaches, right?
Mhm.
Like just like with personal development, there's a lot of different approaches. There's personal development approaches that are more spiritual, a little bit more that are entrepreneurially oriented.
Mhm.
Can you tell me a little bit about your experiences with personal development? Like, do you have any mentors or any big influences that helped you get where you are today?
I don't know if he's considered personal development per se, but Ryan Holiday is an author. He's a Stoic philosopher. And it was a little bit the start of my dive into like getting real deep with myself.
Mhm.
Before that, it was definitely more on the entrepreneurial lines. Like I love Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah.
You know, oh God, there's so many books. I can't even begin to pick some, but it was definitely more like habits, performance, productivity. Charles Gilkey wrote Productive Flourishing. Like, so there's been a bunch of people, but Ryan Holiday wrote this book called Stillness is the Key, which I was sort of discovering mindfulness and meditation at the same time. So it was really just like hit all at the right spot. And he really got me thinking about how pausing and taking time to actually run your own life versus letting it run you is really important. I'm not into like any of the super big gurus, like, like the Tony Robbins and stuff. Like I sort of missed that wave, I think. And then Glennon Doyle, I loved her, but I felt like that was like a personal development self-help book. She's like just a kind of a female cheerleader, I feel like. So
Very, very
there's so many good.
Yeah. Yes. That's very interesting. It seems like we have slightly different lineages and that's the way it is. It's like personal development is and therapy and all of it. There's just so many approaches and
Yeah. What were your big ones?
some of my influences in the personal development space kind of like morphed over time. I would say like early on, like even in high school, I've been really interested in Eastern philosophy. Like I read a lot of books on Buddhism and
Mhm,
Zen and Thich Nhat Hanh. So
mhm.
that's not, I guess, personal development, but it is like it's Eastern philosophy, which they intertwine a lot.
Sure.
Like they're
Yeah.
often based off of each other and that stillness and that Zen,
Mhm.
like you were saying. I'm not familiar with that author or thought leader, but there's like sort of like a simplicity with Eastern philosophy, especially Buddhism. And then I would say over time, I became a yoga teacher too. So that Eastern philosophy kind of came in even through that training. And what's weird about yoga is I mean, the whole thing is personal development, right? It's just like
Right.
physical, emotional, spiritual, artistic, everything yoga means everything
Mhm.
basically, and so it just incorporates everything. And what's interesting about yoga is there's these, Western influences, so it's not like the original yoga anymore. It's got like calisthenics from, Europe and therapy, like, Western therapy,
I got
Freudian,
that. Yeah. Mhm. Oh, got it. Yeah.
like a lot of like personal acceptance of and accepting where you are physically and then moving forward from there. So like a lot of that kind of is a part of my personal philosophy. And then my other kind of personal development stuff came from the music world. So I did a lot of reading about how to perform better and that for that to happen you have to be okay inside.
Mhm.
And, so performing musically. And then when I did my surgical residency, I got back into some of that reading so I could like get centered and like not freak out when I was worried about a case or nervous about a case. And like turns out I didn't really want to do any of that anyway. I didn't want to fight that fight, but so there's
Another big one for me, which is more recent, it would be Kristen Neff too with the self-compassion work. I mean, I talked about that at the conference, but that's been a game changer. I mean, she has so much research, which is good for us, our brains, like double-blinded studies. So
yeah,
she, like, currently, I didn't get in with her initially, but currently she's one of my big thought leaders.
very cool. I have to check her out, and I have to like check out everyone that you mentioned. And then one other person that, well, there are a few other from the artistic world. So what is it called? The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's artistic, but it's definitely personal development. And then Twyla Tharp has a book that I'm blanking on the name of. I'll put it in the show notes later about how to express yourself creatively while also taking care of yourself. And I think that it's so interesting, the personal development world, how it can be applied to the veterinary space because
Mhm.
we're artists too. I think, we're creators as well, especially if we're entrepreneurs. Do you relate to that at all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're crafting plans and discussions all day long. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely using your whole brain, not just the thinking rational side, because, we wouldn't have all the stress if it was just rational thinking. Like, there's so many other aspects. The book I'm currently reading is called Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett. And it's, like, applicable to my children, it's applicable to my employees, it's applicable to me, it's applicable to my clients, like, I'm like, "Wow, this one should be required reading," because we don't talk about feelings enough, in my opinion, in veterinary medicine, and I'm, like, learning emotions that I didn't even know existed or that were emotions, it's crazy.
Oh, wow. That sounds like my kind of book. I have to check that out. Thanks for
Mhm.
that
Yeah,
recommendation.
for sure.
That's really cool. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's the art and science of veterinary medicine. It's the art and science of parenting. It's the art
Mhm.
and science of entrepreneurship,
Yeah,
entrepreneurialism, whatever it's
yeah,
called.
that's a tough word. Yeah. I don't even attempt to say.
I heard myself say the word entrepreneurship on one of the last podcast episodes that I recorded with Peter Weinstein. And I was like, damn, that word sounded weird. Maybe I should say something other than entrepreneurship. Who knows?
Sounds good. I can't even get it out of my mouth, so kudos.
That's funny. So, you have a podcast called The Whole Veterinarian, and I'm also so thankful for your words of wisdom and for meeting with me before I started my podcast. You really helped me get a little bit of confidence and courage. You said something to me about it's an exercise in letting go and just everything can't be perfect. And that
Yeah.
really spoke to me. So, thank you for
Oh,
that. Can you tell me a little bit about how your podcast developed, like what your goals were with that, and how you arrived even at this sort of philosophy that just like kind of let it go. Everything can't be perfect. And, the advice that you gave to me, can you tell me a little bit about how you arrived at that?
sure. It's definitely something I remind myself of daily.
Yeah.
The podcast started because I learned so much from podcasts. So actually getting into podcast was because of my husband, because he wanted me to learn about real estate investing,
Okay.
which I fought a little bit. But we started listening to this one called Bigger Pockets, and they started having more of these entrepreneurs, personal development people on. That's actually where I found out about Ryan Holiday's book and other people. They've had James Clear on. They've had a million people on. It's a big show. And so I started learning all these little tidbits about HR management, about hiring employees, ways to time block your weeks to get more done, about sleep habits. I learned so many different things in these times where I'm driving, right? Which is what I do all day long. And it was so
Right.
helpful for me. And I created the Whole Veterinarian Instagram account and started sharing some of the resources that I was finding, whether it was articles or podcast episodes or other people to follow. And I thought, well, if I want to get this out a little bit more, which I think is important for my colleagues, what's the way I could do this? Like, writing is not the easiest thing for me. I mean, I do write, but it's not something that would just flow naturally. And I want to be learning more about these topics. So if I interviewed people and shared them, it would be a way for me to stay learning and growing. So I took a course, and in that course, I realized that if you completed the homework steps, then you have a podcast. And I realized that about halfway through. And I was like, okay, here we go. Like,
Yeah.
we'll see how this goes. They have a really awesome alumni community. And they are the ones that were like, Seth Godin, his like big thing is like, just ship it, just ship it. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Just get it out there. The world needs to hear what you're talking about. And that really did sink into me because I'm not NPR. I don't have a big production team, but, it seems like people resonate with the interviews that I share. So that's got to be good enough for now. And, I do stay up way too late editing it to make sound just right in my mind as best I can do. But when I spoke to you, you had been thinking about this for a long time. And I was like, I think you just need to go because otherwise, like, we can all think ourselves to death. Like,
Yes, we can. I know.
So I think I absorbed it from that. And so, I mean, the podcast itself, just a thing I didn't know how to do, like that was so helpful for my well-being, like pushing myself to learn something new. I was feeling pretty stagnant after 10 years in equine practice. You're like pretty good at what you do and you do a lot of not the same things every day. Part of our job that's awesome is that we see new things every day, but you know, some of it's routine. And so pushing my brain to learn something new and again, use the creative side of my brain was really important for me. And the interactions and things I've learned and people I've met have been so rewarding. And that's what keeps me doing it still for sure. So
That's awesome.
hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, you did. I love that it feeds you back too. Like it's a give and take. You're
100%.
obviously, I know what it takes to put a podcast together, and you obviously put a ton of heart and soul and time and energy and maybe money into it. And I love that it feeds you back. It's so cool. I feel the same way, actually.
Sure, I can imagine. Yeah.
It's just like this incredible way to connect with people. It's just a cool platform. So I love that you found that and that idea of just get it out. Like, I'm so glad that, we connected and that I had that idea in my head first because I could see myself just like going nuts. Like, it's not perfect. I'm not putting it out. Forget it. Like, no, I need like another month on this episode. And it's like, no, just keep it moving.
Yeah, that's why I don't think a podcast needs to have a strict schedule, but
Mhm.
for me it's better because I'll just obsess. So, I've done it where I've pre-prepped my episodes and I'm like, I'll edit them like 5 times, but now I'm in a cycle where I just have just enough time to get it ready and out. And I'm like, it's better that way. Like I'm wasting my time otherwise. Like I need
Yeah.
a bit of pressure in my life.
Yeah, it's nice to have a kind of a scaffolding that's like, you can't spend too much time on
Mhm.
this. Next.
Nice. Yeah, exactly.
So you also have a really cool Instagram page that's like, I crack up at that thing like every time you post.
I crack up at myself too. And I just think to myself, in 10 or 20 years, what am I think I was doing on Instagram? Because it's
Awesome.
insane, but it makes me laugh. So I guess that's good.
Yeah, I like it. It's really cool how like, it's a wellness thing and sometimes that can get serious and sometimes it can get deep and heavy and I love that you managed to also keep it light, which is really cool. Can you tell me a little bit about the types of content that you aim to put up there and who you're trying to reach and what your goal is to communicate to folks with that content?
Yeah, I probably should have a more specific goal, right? They say to really niche down, but I've always wanted to just share things that have been beneficial to me. And like for me, those big buckets are personal development, which is a huge category, but I can't really pick one thing. And then financial development, because that's another huge component of things that I got organized in the last 4 or 5 years that have really helped myself and my relationship with my husband and family. So those are the two broad topics. And then as I've gone on the equine specific stuff, it's become apparent that that resonates with people. There's not necessarily a lot of equine people talking about the industry on Instagram. So I've sort of that's sort of become my third category of things I share. And, that stuff, yeah, I walk the line between it being funny, but then also like sometimes it's so depressing that you just
Yeah.
have to laugh. And yeah, I try to share things that I find inspirational. On stories, most of the quotes I share, it's because they resonated with me and I just hope that they'll resonate with somebody else and brighten up their day or give them a reality check that they're not alone or that they don't need to beat themselves up about these things. And then the content is generally, I'm promoting the episodes to try to help spread the word about whatever guest I've had on or share other resources, basically. So it's a crazy world. But I've found Instagram and, hashtag Vetstagram to be super supportive. And I've met so many awesome people on there that I'm glad that I jumped in for sure. I'm definitely opening up a bit more than when I first joined. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. I found out about you through your podcast. Shout out to Dr. Nia Perkins.
Yeah, Nia. That's right. Yeah.
Her episode on your show was so cool. So I started kind of following you, and then I followed your Instagram, and I think it would have been just a matter of time before we found each other on the Vetstagram, right?
Probably.
Yeah. So very, very cool, really important work that you're doing. And I mean, I think those kind of like tidbits of daily reminders, just seeing a little note on your Instagram can just kind of pull you back in because it's so easy to forget like us, like we work. This is our work. We work in wellness and sustainability. And this is like part of our job now, part of our life's work and our maybe livelihood, even in some cases. So, even for us, putting out this kinds of content, we need it too, just as much as anyone else, and perhaps more so than others. They always say the folks who need it the most are the ones who lean into it and then maybe end up teaching it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's
So
definitely true for me.
for one, appreciate all of your content that you put out there. And if you're feeling it, probably all of us are feeling it. And so thank you for that. Can you share your top 3 tips for veterinarians who are either equine ambulatory or companion animal house call vets, or maybe even someone who's a mobile vet who's also a mom? So like you have, insight in a lot of different categories of how this all can play out in the, house call and mobile vet experience. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of just top 3 tips regarding self-care, boundaries, longevity, anything
Yeah,
from your
sure.
genius brain?
I think there's some like easy default ones like have boundaries. I didn't
Yes.
when I started, but
Have boundaries, number 1.
if I'm gonna try to think of something maybe someone else hasn't thought of, I think the first thing to do would be to find community. And that can be multiple communities or one that really supports you. It applies to moms as well. Without having other solo equine practitioners around me, I don't think I would have survived this long without having other DVM moms around me or other mom friends around. I wouldn't be walking around and not like laying a puddle on the floor. I think it's important to find community that you feel supported in and seen. Being seen alone is enough to improve your day to day life. I think that we talked about this a little bit already with the stillness, but scheduling time into your week for a break or a mental processing period, or a friend of mine who speaks at the sustainability seminar, she's on Instagram. She says the pause is where you find yourself. So follow her on Instagram. She's the linger movement, but Jesse's big word is pause. And so without a pause, I would have never taken the time to even assess how I was doing, let alone make changes. And so, especially in small solo practices, which I assume, is similar to small animal, but a lot of equine vets are solo, 45% of us, you can just fill up your week with work or office work or, callbacks. It's so easy to do. So if you're not scheduling some downtime to think about yourself, to think about your business, think about future plans, it's really hard to be balanced. And then we also talked about this a little bit too, but I think finding something outside of work that lights you up is really important because veterinary medicine can't be the end all be all for us. It's just not going to cut it.
Right.
As much as I tried for 12 years, there has to be other stuff in life. And so if you're not focusing some of your energy on something else that brings you joy, then you're not going to feel whole or well, I don't think. So those are my top tips.
Love
And
that.
raise prices.
And raise prices. Yes, girl. That is right. And we're going to talk about that on your podcast in about half an hour here.
Everybody jump over to mine and listen to Eve talk about boundaries and pricing.
That's going to be fun. Thank you for that. That's brilliant. Like, yes, yes, and yes to all of that. And is there anything else that you'd like people to know about you or your offerings before we close up shop here in a moment?
This has been super fun chatting. Thanks for having me. Check out the podcast and the Instagram. We already talked about it. If you're an equine vet or you know one, send them over to scpseminars.com. That's the Sustainability in Equine Practice event that we run twice a year. We've had 2 so far, and they've been amazing. And yeah, thanks. Thanks for tuning in today, everybody.
Yeah, you're welcome. And just before we close, since we are in the House Call Vet Cafe, can you tell me what beverage you like to drink, be it coffee, tea, wine, whatever?
Oh, that's cold brew coffee for sure.
All right. Okay. Very nice. All right. Thank you so much, Stacey. It's been awesome chatting with you today, and I will talk to you soon on your platform.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eve. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as the House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for House Call Vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.